Great. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for waiting and for joining. Welcome to Just Zero's second virtual interview, part of our Reduce Today, Reclaim Tomorrow series. My name is Lauren Fernandez and I use she, her pronouns. I am the development director for Just Zero, and I am joined here today by Mei Li of Food Waste Feast, who will introduce herself in just a moment. For anyone not familiar with Just Zero, we are a national nonprofit advancing community-centered zero waste solutions. We work with communities, policymakers, scientists, educators, organizers, and others to implement just and equitable solutions to climate damaging and toxic production, consumption, and waste disposal practices. Mei, thank you so much for joining us today to talk more about how we can reduce food waste. So I'll turn it over to you to share more about yourself and your work.
Great. I am very excited to be here. And this is my second time talking with Lauren. I'm really excited to always chat with you and catch up and discuss food waste tips and everything. So I am a cookbook author and a former restaurateur. And I started the project Food Waste Feast with the idea of helping people, particularly home cooks, learn how to cut down on food waste in their kitchens. And it's a really big problem because lots of people end up throwing out more food than they'd like to. And they don't necessarily know the best storage tips or ways to use up odds and ends, and it can be really overwhelming sometimes. You buy this food and you have great plans for it, and then life kind of gets in the way and things end up going in the bin. I live in Scotland, by the way, and that's why I'm saying bin now. We say rubbish bin instead of the trash. And so you might find me sticking in some unexpected words there. But I really love teaching people using some of the professional tips and tricks that I learned running a restaurant. I used to run a restaurant called Mei back in Boston, which is now a dumpling cafe that my sister runs. And I both learned about cutting down on food waste through running this restaurant, but also through writing cookbooks. And my first cookbook, Double Awesome Chinese Food, sort of taught me as I wrote it how many recipe writers, they say, 1 cup of onions or 1 tablespoon of fresh cilantro. But if you go and you buy a bunch of cilantro, what do you do with 1 bunch minus 1 tablespoon of cilantro? There's so many things that we end up buying for recipes. And a lot of time people who write the recipes don't kind of think about those things. So that got me thinking about how we can write recipes in a way that's more flexible, that's adaptable, that might use up what you've got, that kind of helps you use up this slightly wilted cilantro that you put in the back of your fridge and then forgot about for a week or two. How can we help you save those longer? How can we help you use it? What are ways you can cook with it? What are ways you can refresh it or bring it back to life? There's so many tips there that people can use and add to their kind of repertoire of kitchen techniques. And so through Food Waste Feast, which is both a website and we share a lot of tips on social media, and we recently wrote a cookbook, which is called Perfectly Good Food. And the idea really is to share all those tips and tricks in one place and help people use up all the food that they have that shouldn't go into the compost or the trash.
That's amazing, Mei. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I will say personally, your cookbook has helped me so much with I buy cilantro every week to cook with. And you have helped me, you and your sister have helped me many times to rescue so much cilantro from the compost.
Amazing.
And I've made so many different recipes and green sauces because of that. So yeah, Mei is the real deal, folks. She will
Well,
definitely
thank
help.
you.
Right. So, well, just a couple quick notes before we dive more into this 30-minute interview. A reminder that this interview is being recorded and that the recording will be sent out in the next week to those who have registered. So please be on the lookout for that. But now to dive into today's topic, which is, as we know, reducing food waste, one of my favorite topics. So we're going to be talking today through practical ways you can reduce your food waste at home, as well as the solutions to reducing this on a large scale, just like we're working on at Just Zero. There will also be really great resources dropped in the chat throughout the interview. So I encourage you, please check those out, open those links and bookmark them. These are going to be really helpful resources for you and reducing your food waste on an individual and large scale level. So So anyhow, let's dive into our first question. So I know you touched a little bit this on your interview, but what else can you tell us more about Food Waste Feast and what led you and your sister to found it?
Yes. So, Food Waste Feast is really my idea of wanting to let people know what you can do to cut down on food waste in your own kitchen. And I used to love to go to my friends' houses and they'd say, "Oh, I don't know what to make to eat. What am I going to make? I don't know what to do with everything here." And I'd pull open their fridges and I'd just say, "Okay, look at what we've got. We can take this, these carrots, and we can take this broccoli, and we can take this, and I know you've got pasta in your cupboard. And so how can we kind of make this into a meal?" And through just loving to do that for my friends, also loving to just make up meals at home, and through some of this professional experience, we made up a whole bunch of recipes that we call these hero recipes. And the idea is that these hero recipes can kind of swoop in and rescue whatever you've got in your fridge, because you can make pasta with kind of infinite ingredients. You can make pickles out of what you've got. You can make stock with the ends of your onions and the peelings of your carrots and all these things that people often throw out. You can make these amazing dishes from. Things that I started making once I did this that I had never made before is dishes like kind of a bread casserole or a bread pudding, where you can save the stale ends of your bread and you can put it all together with cheese and whatever green vegetable you have in the fridge and make another dish. And it kind of made me realize that there's so much good food out there that people just don't know what to do with. How do we save that? How do we turn them into more delicious dishes? Because, if it doesn't appeal to you, it's not going to get eaten. And then things end up getting wasted that we don't want to waste. So this book that we wrote, actually, this is our book. It's called Perfectly Good Food, a totally achievable zero waste approach to home cooking. And we say it's achievable because we want to make it something that is actually realistic for people. Sometimes you think, "Oh my gosh, I bought all this food and I don't know how I'm possibly going to get to it." But there's so many reasons why it is really satisfying to not throw out the food that you've spent all your hard-earned money on. It's both makes a difference for your grocery bill if you're not wasting food. It is, I think, personally satisfying to find something in your fridge that you're like, "I don't know what to do with this," and then you eat it for dinner, and that just feels so magical. And then for the environment, Just Zero is doing so much to minimize the impact of food waste. And if you can cut down on it in your home kitchen, I think that's a great kind of individual step that can help people feel better.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect segue into our next question. I know you're currently based in Scotland, but lived many years in the United States. So can you share, why do you think we waste so much food in the United States?
Great question. There is so much there, and there are definitely problems up and down the food chain, unfortunately, across the food chain. On farms, there might be, that it's not economically viable for the farmer to get every last bit of edible food from the fields. Maybe the food is getting rejected because it doesn't look perfect. And that's really sad because, an ugly tomato can still be a delicious tomato. And that same thing happens in supermarkets where, they don't want to sell the really weird shaped vegetables, even though they taste great. And actually, one of the things now that I live in Scotland that they do here that I really love is I can buy a bag of, they call it wonky potatoes. They're like weird looking potatoes, but they still taste great. And so the more that supermarkets and sort of businesses can change how they do things and getting people to accept things that might not look like the perfect ideal of a tomato, the less likely it is to go to waste. But and that happens at restaurants too, of course, people, food that they can't get to, food that people don't eat and gets left on the plate. But the amazing thing about a lot of these businesses is that it is their actual job to make sure they're using up as much food as possible so they don't lose money. And that's how they've structured their business. And that's what we did when I used to run a food truck and a restaurant. We realized that anytime we spent our money on food and it didn't get used up, that was money we were wasting. And so people don't necessarily know how to do that in their own homes. So many people don't get taught how to cook. Those are things that we have to go out and learn by ourselves, and that can be really hard. And we have many other jobs. So the job of learning how to not waste food is like lower and lower down the line. If you actually have to feed yourself and your family, that's a lot of jobs. So if we can help people sort of take those professional tips and tricks to minimize the food waste, then that's something that is really huge for people. And then there are a few structural things that are also in the mix, like expiration dates is a really big one, where there's no actual national standard for what it means to have best by or used by or eat before or all these things. So a lot of times people think, oh, that date has passed by, I have to throw that out. This is a safety issue. If I eat this, I'm going to get sick. But most of the time, with a few exceptions, an expiration date on a package is the manufacturer's best idea of when the product is going to be its best quality. So like the crunchiest crackers or the most satisfyingly crispy chips. It's not that you're going to get sick after you eat them. And so a lot of times people think that they need to throw it out, but instead it can be eaten. It just is, like 2% less crunchy, or it can be turned into something else. And so the more that people understand that those expiration dates are a suggestion, and if things are stored properly, even things like yogurt and cheese that you might think, oh, this is going to be a safety issue, those things can actually be eaten. And one of the things that I really like to talk about is the smell test, which is a great actual way to see if something is okay to eat, even though it seems very unscientific. But actually humans evolved to be able to tell a lot of the time when you shouldn't consume something. And so if you smell something and it doesn't smell good, then don't eat it, put it in the compost. But if it smells okay, a lot of the time it's good to eat. We tell people to use their senses, use your eyes, look at it. You can touch it, you can smell it. Use your common sense, use Google. Those are all really helpful ways to tell whether something's actually good to eat rather than just relying on a date.
That's incredibly helpful, Mei. Thank you. And I think that all of that makes sense. I think there is a lot of fear around possibly becoming sick because you're eating something that is, past the posted expiration date, but I think having this kind of education and knowledge is so important to helping us reduce food waste. And like you said, there's so many layers to why, there is so much food waste. It's definitely not an individual problem. There's a lot of structural problems that we have to address as well. So thank you so much for elaborating on that. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, people, it can be really hard to get to things in life. You buy these things and then you get invited out for dinner, or this happens and that happens. And so any time that we can kind of figure out or suggest ways to get to things, the better. And so we're all about doing that with Food Waste Feast.
Absolutely. And so I actually would love to hear, my next question is, as you mentioned, you and your sister recently published your cookbook, which I also have, as I mentioned, Perfectly Good Food, and I've used many times, and I take out multiple times a week to reference to. So this is all about cooking creatively without any food waste. So what has the reaction been to the book? Because I think it does, test up some folks like, oh, I can't use this withered red pepper that's been sitting in my fridge for a while, but maybe it's still good to use like in this salad or stir fry. What's been the reaction like to that book?
Absolutely. We have so many people telling us, number one, tips and tricks that they use at their own houses. We love hearing from people. If you've got any thoughts, please drop them in the chat. We get lots of questions saying exactly what you're saying, like, is it okay to eat a strawberry if another strawberry in the container is moldy? My answer is yes, by the way. Just wash it carefully and eat it as soon as possible. But I love kind of having these chats with people. And, there's so many cases where things are good to eat. There are some cases where, it is okay to say, I'm not going to eat that. But ideally, then you can compost it. And that's a big thing that we also love talking about because, even my husband, who I've talked to about food waste for probably a decade now, he didn't really realize the impact of food going into landfill as opposed to food going to compost. And if you can compost your food, it actually turns into something that is beneficial. It becomes this rich soil that helps plants grow, that can help grow other fruits and vegetables, and it's so great. When food goes into the landfill and it's in a plastic bag and it gets shut up and it has no oxygen, then it turns into methane. And methane, probably most people know here, is a very potent greenhouse gas. It's very bad for the environment. And so that's why it makes such a big difference to compost as opposed to putting things into the trash. And so it makes me feel better when I know that I'm not going to eat something because for whatever reason, if it's going into the compost, then I know that it's going to a good cause, a good cause. So we love talking about that with people. We love hearing their suggestions. You know, one of the things that's so interesting when we've been talking about this book is that sometimes people see zero waste as, you know, this trendy thing that they've seen on social media, but zero waste cooking has been around since people ate. People have been cooking for so long across every culture, having these dishes that are designed to use this up, having, you know, this cuisine designed around ways to eat more vegetables and less meat, for example. So we're not doing anything new, but in a lot of ways we're bringing that back. And we love hearing people's grandmother's tips or people's ways that they have been raised to save things, or even traditions that they just have in their own home. So one of the things I like to do in my house is sometimes the two things happen where there's a fridge full of stuff and I am just too tired to cook. And I'll say, kids, you can have anything you want in the fridge for dinner. And we call it a fridge forage night, where they just get to forage in the fridge and pick whatever they want. If they're going to eat yogurt for dinner, that's fine. And they love it. They get, you know, this kind of excitement of getting to choose whatever they want, but also we're cutting down on food waste. And also I don't have to make anything for dinner. So that's really nice. And it's fun hearing other people's family traditions where they do something similar and they call it something else. And I love hearing about all these different ways that people do things in their own homes or from their own cultures or whatever they have kind of developed to make sure that food gets eaten in their house.
Absolutely. I love that too. And I love hearing about how like this is not a new idea, but this is something that many of us, we know that our grandmothers and other, you know, family members have been doing for generations and that is done around the world. I remember many times getting together with friends and people just, you know, bringing, especially when we were college students and, you know, living on tighter budgets and everyone just bringing like what they had. And that just like, those are some of the best memories I have, you know, like because of what that like bonding over that food together, what that meant, and knowing that rescuing food, knowing that we were not letting things go to waste and that we were fortunate enough to have like a good meal together. So I absolutely love hearing about like your experiences too, like the food foraging in your fridge with your children. So I would love to hear, I feel like we've talked a lot about how to cut back on food waste in our homes, but how can individuals play a role in addressing food waste in their city, their town, their state, or even nationally?
That is a really great question. And I already covered the idea of compost, and having a dedicated food waste bin in your own home is great, but you also don't have to have your own compost bin. You know, that can be daunting to people for lots of reasons. If you don't have any outdoor space or it's not something that you think that you can handle. I am particularly bad at yard maintenance. And so I did not want to have a compost bin myself even. But what I did was I managed to find a great company where I used to live in North Carolina, and they would come pick it up at my house, and then they would take it away and give me new bins. And so there's often places where you can either have a private company help you manage your food waste, or in so many places, the food waste collection services are starting to pop up in cities. And so we did a project with the city of Boston to help popularize their new food waste collection. And it's getting to be more and more popular, which is so great. And speaking of where I used to live in North Carolina, I also found an amazing group called Towards Zero Waste. So lots of times, if you Google around, you can find kind of like-minded people in your town or your city who also can help be a connection in terms of reducing waste of all kinds, whether it's food waste or textile waste or plastic, all sorts of things. You can kind of find groups that can help you connect with other people. Whatever it is, they have, that group in particular helped pilot compost collection drop-off places across the neighborhood where I used to live in North Carolina. And that was super cool to see. And of course, you know, Just Zero. It's so awesome to be an advisory board member. I get to be in on all the amazing things that you guys are doing and hear what's going on throughout the year. And that feels really lucky to see what you all are doing in regards to food waste, but also recycling and pollution and everything. So supporting Just Zero is an amazing way to kind of give back at the larger level. And you all have your eyes on sort of things on so many different levels in terms of government and really making sure that everything from a recycling bottle bill to food waste is thought about. And that's really cool too. So there's so many ways that you can help. And also even on a level of sort of what I love about thinking about food waste is it's something that you can do for the environment, but also it is really satisfying to cut down on your grocery bill, and food prices have gone up. And for example, talking to your manager at the supermarket or the store that you shop in, another thing that they do here in Scotland where I live is they have my favorite grocery store has a shelf, and it's called the Too Good to Waste shelf. And everything that has its expiration date coming up within the day or the next day, they put it on the shelf and you get it at a discount. And a lot of times this is amazing. This is amazing for everybody, right? If you're going to eat it soon, or you don't worry so much about expiration dates, then you get a discount on your groceries. And it's great for the store because then they can start to move that product out and they have a chance to make money on something that otherwise they would have been obligated to put in the trash most of the time, even though it's still perfectly good to eat. And so many people have, taken videos or pictures of supermarkets just throwing out a horrendous amount of food that is perfectly good to eat because of the expiration date on it. And so that feels so sad when people go hungry and at the same time this food is getting wasted. But a lot of time these stores don't really know that demand is there. They don't know that people will do that. And so if you can just pop by, say hi to the store manager, the more stores that can implement policies like that, the better it is for everybody.
Absolutely. I love the idea of connecting with local stores and businesses to take away their excess food at the end of the day. This was years ago when I was a teenager. I worked at an Einstein Bagels, I remember, and every day when I was closing the store, there was a mother and her daughter would come and pick up like all the excess bagels that we had in pastries and things that we had not sold for the day, because we would only, sold what we made that day. And
Right.
was just a huge bag every day, and they would come, they were committed, they would pick it up and take it and distribute it to food
So
banks or
smart.
communities of people who are experiencing homelessness or food
Really amazing.
insecurity. And I just think like, the more type of communities and networks we have organizing that kind of food waste reduction, and then also meeting people's basic needs, is a really powerful thing to be part of an experience. And like you said, Just Zero, we're definitely advocating and advancing legislation that would help reduce food waste at a state level. There's opportunities to do things like that at the local level. We've seen different cities implement laws, banning food scraps from the waste stream. So we know that it's definitely possible to make this kind of this kind of policy. So it's really exciting to see what can happen at a local level and even a larger level, and how many people are willing and want to be part of these type of solutions. Um,
Absolutely. And actually,
yeah.
just one thing that reminded me of, there's an app, and I think it's also called Too Good to Waste, where it puts up food from restaurants that you can buy at a discount that they cannot sell by the end of the day. So there's kind of ideas and apps springing up all over the place that are meant to connect people who want food with the restaurants who can't necessarily sell that food or want to get rid of it. Because exactly as you say, these companies like the store you used to work for, they don't want to see that food go to waste either. And so anytime that we can find ways to make that connection, the better.
Absolutely. So as we're approaching the end of our half hour, I wanted to ask if you could quickly share, what are your top 3 tips for folks just starting out on their zero waste cooking journey?
Great question. So there are a few things that I love talking about that are kind of systems that I like to implement in my kitchen. And number one is having these scrap bags in my freezer. So I have 2 reusable bags that I keep in the freezer, and one of them is all vegetable scraps. So that's the carrot peelings, the ends of my onions, the bottom of the celery, anything that is not getting used goes into my scrap bag. And at some point, and that includes chicken bones, meat bones, I'm going to make stock. And that's so satisfying because you can buy stock for $5 at the supermarket, or you can make it for free with all the things that you otherwise would have put in the compost. And I love that. And I also have a freezer bag for fruit. Try not to get them mixed up. And, my son doesn't like to eat the squishy blueberries, or they insist that they're going to eat a whole apple and then they don't. So all the fruit goes in there, and then I like to make smoothies with them. So that's a great way to kind of have a catch-all for all of these things that might go into the compost bin. And I also like to have a little area in my fridge that's called the Eat Me First box. And so you can put a little box in there, or if you have a drawer or whatever it is, that's where all the things go where I want to use them up, or I have a half of something. So I used to cut a lemon, and then I'd stick the lemon somewhere in the fridge, and then it would migrate back to the fridge, and then I would find 4 lemon halves in my fridge. And then I realized if I put it the same place every time and had that area marked, I would never have to have like moldy lemons all over the back of my fridge. So the Eat Me First box has that, and the half tomato and a piece of onion, or the apples that are just starting to go a little bit wrinkly, and I know that I need to eat those first. When I buy more apples, the older ones go into that bin. So that's super useful. And I think like the clean out night is so useful, not only for the fridge, but kind of building in those nights where you know that you're going to eat something from the freezer. Because so many times we save things and then we put them in the freezer. I also recommend labeling and dating things. That also really helps, because you think, oh, I'm absolutely going to remember what this brown thing is that I put in the back of the freezer. And then 6 months later, it's like, not a clue. I don't know what that is. So if you label and date it, and then you build in a night for eating what's there, not cooking something new, life is easier for you. You have something that you cooked that was delicious 6 months ago. Now you can eat it. And then it's just less likely that you will have bought food for that night, and more likely that you can avoid having purchased this food and never getting to it. So those are a few things that if you can put them into your routine, or establish them in your kitchen, all these little things add up in a way that can really help you cut down on your food waste.
I love all those ideas. And I know I've heard you talk about some of these before, and I've implemented them, and they are so fabulous and work so well.
Awesome.
Like especially the catch-all bag, having especially a young child. So I cannot tell you how many, like they are like, I cannot eat these blueberries if they're too squished or they're
Yes.
too soft,
So
which is totally
opinionated.
okay. So I like, that's totally fine. But like we get to make a smoothie with it after, which is amazing. So those are really incredibly helpful tips. Thank you so much, Mei.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
on that note, I just wanted to say thank you again, Mei, for taking the time to join us today. This was incredibly great information. And I also wanted to say thank you to all the participants today. We are so grateful for you taking time out of your afternoon to join us today. We hope that you enjoyed today's interview and that you're able to leave with some new resources. Again, don't forget to check out the links in the chat and save those. I think those will be incredibly helpful on your food waste reduction journey. And again, we are so grateful for your support, and we encourage you to please check out Food Waste Feast. And have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate the chance to talk. It's always fun to chat with you.
Absolutely. Same here, Mei. Thank you.